Welcome to Clay Mastermind with Don Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab, your ultimate podcast for mastering the mental game of clay shooting and gaining exclusive insights from the top minds in the industry. Join us as we dive into the strategies of elite athletes, uncover the secrets to peak performance, and share powerful techniques to enhance your shooting skill. Plus, get behind-the-scenes access to the leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of the clay shooting industry. Get ready to elevate your game, sharpen your focus, and gain insider knowledge from the best in the business. Let's get started. Here's your host, Don Grant.
Okay, folks. Thanks for tuning in. This is Clay Mastermind with Don Grant. Thanks for following. Thanks for all your feedback. I appreciate all of you that have come up to me at events and have thanked me for this podcast. I enjoyed doing it. It's been very fun and unique. And I too like the approach, of getting to know people and the industry experts and those that are actively involved, whether they're shooters or making stuff happen and helping the sport grow. So today, I have Don Currie with me, and he is Chief Instructor of the NSCA and has been for 12 years. He's also one of the nation's most active shooting instructors and gun fitter. So, Don, thank you very much for being here with me.
Thanks, Don. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, I really like to get to know people, but I also love for you to give your highlights, like what makes you great.
Well, I think what makes me good at what I do is I really focus on my student or my client, depending on the scenario. And in some cases, my client, so to speak, is actually a blossoming coach. So I teach, obviously I do freelance instruction. I do a lot of gun fittings along with custom gun sales, as well as in my chief instructor role, I teach a lot of instructor courses for the NSCA, and I work with another 15 or so level 3 instructors around the country that are certifying instructors, and they all run level 1 courses. A couple of them run level 2 courses. I run all the level 3 courses, and I also do level 2 courses as well. So I guess getting back to your question, is focusing on the client, focusing on the coach that I'm working with. We're focusing on the client with regard to gun fitting or student with regard to my teaching.
Gotcha. Those are some good highlights, and I'm looking forward to talking to you more in this podcast about your chief instructor position and what that means exactly and what you've done to help with the NSCA in that regard. And I'm even curious about some stats and some numbers. So like how many instructors are there? Do you know things like that off the top of your head?
Yeah, so I can give you round numbers, but the reason those aren't specific numbers is because we have a lot of instructors that are inactive.
Yeah.
So, being an instructor, having gone through the certification program is one thing, but being an active instructor is another. So
Right.
if I had to throw it out, I'd say that there are about 1,000 total instructors out there, and that's a total. And then there are, probably 40 or 50 level 3 instructors, and probably about 60, 70 or so level 2 instructors.
I would have totally thought that number was so much higher. I'm actually shocked because
Yeah.
the program's been around for a long time. So I'm just
Yeah,
really
yeah.
surprised.
Well, the thing is, I would say that it used to be more the case that people would attend the level 1 course and use it for a shooting lesson. So in other words, they're thinking, okay, there's got to be something else I can learn that will help my shooting. And a lot of folks do come to the level 1 course for that very reason. In fact, when I went to my level 1 course, I had no intention of teaching 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I went was that was sort of in my competitive phase where I was really competing heavily, and that's really all I wanted to do with regard to sporting clays. I didn't have any desire to teach. So I went to the level 1 course thinking, hey, there's got to be some secret mojo, something that I can learn that I don't know in a level 1 course. So that was my reason for going. It used to be the reason that a lot of folks go to the level 1 course. That's decreased over time. more and more people are coming because they truly want to get back to the sport. They want to teach others. They may be retiring and want to, make a living out of it, or it may just be given back to the sport, teaching on a pro bono basis for youth teams.
Nice.
Because there's a lot of need out there for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotcha. Well, let's just rewind the clock a little bit. So I'm curious, like, where did you grow up and when did you start shooting and how does this all begin for you?
Yeah, I can't even remember when I didn't have a gun in my hand, So my mother and father were not big gun people, but my grandfather on my mother's side was. He was a big hunter. So he was the one that really sparked my interest in firearms. And it really started out with rifle shooting.
Okay.
So he was a hunter, and so I started out with a BB gun, like most folks do. Then went to pellet gun with a scope, and loved hunting squirrels and birds and all that as a young kid. And then my parents sent me away to summer camp each summer for about 8 years, which was probably an indication of what a pain in the neck I was. So I would go off to summer camp for 8 weeks every summer, and started in my second grade. So I was, I guess, about 7 or 8. And it was a sailing and swimming camp because my mother thought that any man worth his salt would learn how to know how to sail and swim.
Okay.
So, which was true. But the thing that interested me most was riflery. So this particular summer camp in the Adirondacks of New York had a riflery program. So, man, I just ate that up. I mean, I just love shooting. I started competing at that age right away in NRA intercamp competitions. And over the next 7 years, worked my way up the NRA rifle ranks, competing intercamp wise. And at the same time, I had the opportunity a couple times to hunt with my cousins in North Carolina when the quail population still existed in North Carolina. So it was mostly rifle, but a lot of shotgun too. When I was 16, I had this very, very interesting thing happen to me. I was at the same summer camp. I was supposed to be a counselor in training that summer. And the range had fallen in. So all the baffles, all the sand, everything was a mess. It's the weather, all the wood rotted and everything. So the owner came out and said, hey, to the instructor, the rifle instructor, because I was just a counselor training, you need to rebuild the range. I'll get you some wood and sand and some heavy backs, and, we can rebuild it. And he was like, well, that's not really what I signed up for. So see ya. And so he turns to me and says, would you like to be the riflery instructor? I said, well, I can't. I'm only 16, NRA certified or any of that stuff. He just, don't worry, you're not the riflery instructor. And if the cops show up, just send somebody down to the mess hall. As there was no cell phones, and that would have been probably 1972 or 3, and have them call the office, and we'll send somebody who's qualified down there. So I became the head riflery instructor at my summer camp for my last summer. And fast forward to military, I was a military officer for 7 years after I graduated college. And of course, I was an infantry guy. The tool of our trade was assault rifles. Most of what I did was rifle, and didn't have much time for sporting clays or bird hunting in those days, and because most of that time was overseas. And then I was in the corporate world for 22 years. But
all right, folks, we'll be right back after a sponsored segment. Are you missing clays and wondering why? ShotCam can help. It's a lightweight camera that attaches under your barrel to record every shot, with a red dot showing where your barrel was pointed at the moment of truth. Just turn it on. It automatically saves everything. Instantly replay the videos on your phone, and they are clear enough to even see the pellets. I've used ShotCam frequently at my shotgun club. Not only has it been used in instruction time, but as a little different twist, I use it for making my social media content, because there's nothing like seeing that target break in the air and having a really great camera that does that. Super excited to have them on board here. Get your ShotCam at shotcam.com with the code TheClayLab. That's just one word, and you get 10% off. So the average shooter improves 10% in their first 30 days of using the camera. So that ShotCam, spelled SHOT, then KAM. So spell it with a K.
I guess 2000, around the year 2000 is when I first shot sporting clays. It was in Addyville Farm in Rhode Island. And I was introduced to it by a guy during a corporate shoot. And I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, you get to blow stuff up with a shotgun legally? This is incredible. So I was immediately hooked. So bought a shotgun. There was a range really close to me that I didn't even know existed, which was Peacedale Shooting Preserve. Richie Frizella owned it at the time. And Richie gave me my first lesson in sporting clays. And Richie, just a tremendous guy. I still keep in touch with him. And that's Richie Frizella Sr. And anyway, that's really where it took off. I was really busy with my job, so I didn't have time to compete a lot, but I did compete once or twice in 2002, I think. And then I really didn't start competing heavily till I moved to Florida. And that was the end of 2005. And I had shot a little bit over the years, but not a lot. So 2005 was really when I started shooting, started competing.
Yeah.
And 2006 through, let's say 2012 was really my competitive phase, where I really loved competing in the sport. But then I also had to balance my corporate career as well, and a family.
Right. Well, that's interesting. And not very long after that, because you just brought us to, what did you say, 2000 and...
Yeah, so 2012, I decided to ditch the corporate scene and see if I couldn't turn my passion into my profession. So, I started to put the word out among folks in the industry that I had been competing in for 6-7 years, and was offered a job as a general manager of the Gilchrist Club, which is a 27,000 acre high-end private shooting preserve and hunting preserve in Northwest Florida. And that was really my break from the corporate world and going full time into my passion, which was hunting and shooting.
Nice.
I was still competing at the time, but as a general manager, weekends are the big time. And so I didn't, my competitive, my ability to compete on weekend tournaments was reduced substantially. So it was a rare thing that I got to compete, but I did still every once in a while. And that was sort of the beginning of my journey in the sport. 2 years later, I left the Gilchrist Club and I started teaching freelance. At the Gilchrist Club, I was doing a lot of teaching and a lot of gun fitting and gun sales, custom gun sales mostly. And then I started teaching on my own in 2014 full time. And then shortly thereafter, I was asked there was a process that I went through to I was asked to put my hat in the ring for Chief Instructor. So making a long story short, that's how the Chief Instructor thing came about.
Yeah, an awesome position, especially for where you were at that time and what you were interested in doing. Not only getting the general management position at this huge private club, which sounds amazing, and then also that position with NSCA. Sounds like a great transition for you.
Well, honestly, if you think about it, it makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, hey, wait a minute. Let me get this straight. You were an Army officer, then you were in the corporate world, then and you competed, and then you were general manager of a what? A hunting plantation, and then you started teaching. What? It makes no sense. I will tell you that I look back on my corporate career, and I say, I probably should have been doing this all along. I was just trying to chase the provide for my family and chase the dollar and work my way up the corporate ladder. To really and truly, I'm very blessed, and I have I'm a Christian. I have a lot of faith in the Lord, and this illogical career path that I've had, I credit to Him, and
nice.
So
that's awesome, and doing what you love and loving what you do, and
yeah, it's an incredible blessing. It's been an incredible blessing.
Nice. I didn't realize it till right at the beginning of this interview. Don had reached out to me. I guess you said it was the first year in to being the chief instructor at NSCA. And it happened to be the same time. So that was like 2013 or so.
Yeah, 14, yeah.
Okay. I had been working with clay shooters doing the mental training for like 3 years already, but it was behind the scenes. And it was with Wendell Cherry and some of his students and John Woolley and some of his students, totally behind the scenes. I came out of the closet in 2013 and started doing like vendoring at the US Opens and some of the different events. So for me, that was a big step. I was like a single mom trying to, penetrate this industry and get the word out there. Don had contacted me because he was in the midst of revamping the manuals for the instructors and really wanted to have, correct me if I'm wrong, this is how I remember it, really wanted to have a mental game aspect to it because you recognize the value of that and thought it should be part of the instruction program. So you learned what I teach. We did work together so you could at least speak from knowledge on what it was. As far as I know, I got a line or two in one of the instruction manuals, right? There's something in there.
That's true. That's absolutely everything you said is absolutely true. And I think there was some misunderstanding of this when I first came to the of who I was and how I operate. But when I write something, and I was tasked by the NSCA to rewrite all the curriculum, and when I rewrite curriculum, I don't for a minute think that all that's going to come to my head and I know better than everybody else what to say or do. I always seek out other people's opinions, but also other people's methodology, right?
Yeah.
Because not everybody thinks the same, not everybody sees the same, not everybody has the same athletic ability. I mean, everybody is different. And I take that approach with every one of my students that shows up in the parking lot, for the first time. So when I went to rewrite the manuals, for a number of sections, I reached out to people who had knowledge and worked and dedicated themselves solely to that area. And one of them was the mental game. So, and to me, and I don't know if you may not accept this, but I have always felt that there's sort of two areas of expertise in the mental game. It's those who have the expertise in biofeedback, which is, for the viewers, I guess you don't know what that is. It's basically the electrical impulses in your brain operate on different wavelengths, and different wavelengths are conducive to different types of activity, or they occur when your brain is working in different ways. So when you're analytical, let's say if someone busts in your front door, right, and you're running down the stairway with your shotgun, you have a very high frequency in your brainwaves, right, because you're in fight or flight mode, and then you have another mode that you're in where you're in deep sleep, right? So those are the two extremes, and everything else in between. But there is a certain brainwave frequency that is conducive to hand-eye coordination, commonly referred to as low alpha. Right? So, yeah. So in that, and so one of the areas of mental game is that measuring and refining of biofeedback. In other words, figure out what you need to be thinking about, the way your brain needs to be working, what it needs to be processing at the time you're trying to optimize your hand-eye coordination, right? But then the other aspect of the mental game was why I turned to you. I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. In fact, I think probably the more fungible aspect of the mental game that you handle is probably more important than the biofeedback, because biofeedback shows you the result, but it really doesn't show you how to get there, right? Whereas what you do in sort of helping your students control what the brain is thinking. Okay. So in the manual, I'm not sure this came from you, but certainly my approach to explaining it in the manual did, which was that there's sort of three parts to the brain, right? There's the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and then there's something that we call the self-image, or in the manual, we call it the glass, right? So there's nothing we can do.
I think that's Lanny Basham. At least the self-image. The third one, self-image, is what he talks. He talks about all three. I talk about two plus some other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I refer to self-image as the glass, right? Because your glass is either half full or it's half empty. Right? So you can't really impact the way you think about yourself as a shooter on the day of competition, right? That is a slow build that happens over time, as you well know. I'm not, you're the expert in this area. I'm not. There's a slow build of your self-image that builds over time, and there are things you can do to increase that self-image so that when you show up on the day of competition, you think of yourself as a successful shooter rather than thinking about the targets you missed over the last 3 or 4 times.
Right.
And then there's the subconscious mind, which is a multitasker. And then there's the conscious mind. And I always explain it like this. The bad news is the conscious mind has to think of something all the time. That's the bad news. So this whole aspect of quiet the mind, like, you know, erase any thoughts from your mind is absolutely impossible. But yet it's something that
challenging, but not impossible. But go ahead.
yeah, well, we might disagree, but
Yeah.
but I don't think it's possible to completely erase conscious thought. Just to stop conscious thought. I think your conscious mind, the good news or bad news is it has to think of something all the time. The good news is it can only think of one thing at a time. So if you program what goes into it, if you program your thoughts, if you are disciplined about what thoughts are going through your mind at the time you need to execute, a shot pair, then that's really what we strive for. I think that area, really all three of those aspects of the brain, right? The self-image, the subconscious, the conscious, what you work on, right? That's your expertise.
And then I add in the ego because that can be a hindrance if you don't have that under control. But conscious, subconscious. And I don't really teach a lot about the unconscious because that's like your eyes blinking and your heart beating and all of that. But single-pointed attention on the conscious mind has been around for thousands of years in Eastern philosophy and all that. But, for a long time, Buddhist monks who pray, meditate, I should say, 8-10 hours a day, they didn't let scientists come in and study their mind to try to understand what was going on. So there was a perception that these folks that are expert meditators, which just means going into the alpha theta state, like you said, that they must be clearing their thoughts 100%. So when they did start allowing for interviewing and EKGs and all sorts of stuff, it was found that they would have thoughts, but they didn't emotionally attach to them. And you can focus in, and there is the one-pointed attention. We can focus in on a particular thing, but they experienced them deliberately, more like clouds passing through instead of like, I just missed that target and it's over now, right? Like that's attaching to a thought and having this emotional reaction to it. But the other thing that came to my mind while you were talking is just the nature of what the zone state is, right? So which I've done, I've interviewed hundreds of people about this, like how would you describe the zone state? And they all talk about it in the same way. And one of the things that everybody says is that they didn't have any conscious level thinking, like they weren't analyzing, they weren't thinking, like it almost didn't even feel like them pulling the trigger because it just happened, right? It just felt like because they're so used to thinking, they're so used to being in that beta state that it's weird and foreign to them when they have quieted that conscious mind into more of an alpha theta state. But it was very exciting to me. It was probably 5 to 8 years ago when science actually said that the peak performance state for elite athletes is the alpha state. I'd already identified that because I'm a hypnotist, right? So I help people go into alpha theta state. I'd already identified the similarities and was training people into the alpha state. And then great thing when science basically said it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, so the first time I'd ever heard any mention, and I'm the type of person that somebody mentioned something to me and I'm going to go, and then I'm going to research the heck out of it, right? So the first person ever mentioned alpha state to me was when Currie, and it was when he was working with you. Yeah. So, but I didn't realize that at the time. So I went back and started looking into this biofeedback and sort of the spectrum of brainwave activity. And what I found, and again, it may be a different thought process, and I may not be explaining it the way you would explain it, but the key is how do I get in that state as I'm closing my gun and getting ready to call for the bird. And, when you're explaining this to people, they're like, okay, what are you talking about? What is it, low alpha? So I really don't explain it like I say, you've got to get in a certain mental state. So what happens when we pre-shot plan, we are not by any means in the low alpha. In fact, we are in a higher frequency level that is not conducive to hand-eye coordination, or some call eye-hand coordination. So when we're outside the box doing our pre-shot planning, that's a very necessary thing to do, right?
Be conscious.
But it's a big conscious phase. But we have to have the understanding as a shooter. We have to have the understanding that we need to put a huge chasm, this huge, Grand Canyon in the way our mind works between what we do outside the box when we're pre-shot planning And what we're doing inside the box as we're moderating our brain emissions, essentially.
Right.
And the way I always describe the low alpha state, and you described it really well when you said that it's sort of like not being in yourself. It's being outside of yourself. I like to call it an out-of-body experience, right? So the way you get that is, and this is the analogy I've used hundreds of times. Imagine yourself sitting on your back porch in a rocking chair, rocking back and forth. No one's talking to you. There's no music. You're not listening to anything other than birds are chirping, beautiful day, rocking back and forth. And your mind goes somewhere other than where you are.
Daydreaming.
Yeah, daydream, exactly. So, and the way I encourage my students to get there is to visualize, or the I and the optimal process, which is what I refer to in my first book. So it's really imaging, imagining something that's really not happening in the present. So in the case of, as an example, you're in the box, you're just finished shooting the last pair. Now you're ejecting the shells, you're loading. And while you're doing that, your mind is going to not just what it's going to look like, but what it's going to feel like. You're imagining what it's going to feel like to execute that pair. So your mind goes to somewhere where it's not in the present, because you're not shooting the pair right now. You're actually just loading and breathing, doing the deep breathing. Your mind is going to what it's going to feel like when you execute the pair.
Tricky thing with that as a suggestion is they can also, because it could go either way, they could become very beta, thinking about the details of what's in that visualization. What does this feel like? That can be very analytical. But at the same, it could go either way, because it could also go into like this daydreamy state like you're saying. So a person could go either way with that. I would say it's better to probably encourage them to pay attention to what it feels like as they're falling asleep at night. Like you had already said early on, you've got delta sleep and you got beta analytical wide awake, alphas right below beta, theta's right below that. And so every human passes through alpha theta to go to sleep, and every human passes back up from theta to alpha to beta every time they wake up. So that to me normalizes it, right? Like this is every human's doing this. It's not weird. It's not out of your reach. So then the trick becomes, okay, so now that I'm paying attention, the times that I can't fall asleep is because my brain's spinning, right? I'm in this beta. Right. I'm analyzing the day. I can't stop thinking about something that happened earlier, which, like I said, that's the 50-50 that could happen. Because laying in bed, visualizing an earlier conversation, an issue that happened, how you shot earlier in that day is where it can get iffy, because it can keep you in beta. But if they can start paying attention to some of the techniques and information and skills to just calm down, to fall asleep, and then go, okay, well, now let me hover back up here. Let me pay attention to try to hover in the middle, which is what hypnosis is, or meditation, and hovering in that middle and getting really familiar, not only with that middle, but what does it feel like when I take myself back out again? Because we'll all do that a million times a day, right? We'll start thinking about something again.
Yeah, I think, as you're reloading and visualizing, how to get to that low alpha state. I think that's really like your bread and butter, right? That's and I don't think honestly that's my expertise. All I know is you have to get there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, but one of the things that I say to my students is you have to understand that there has to be a big break between the process of pre-shot planning, where you're in beta, right? You're in high beta, right? Or maybe not high beta, but beta certainly. And that's a lot of analytical work there, a lot of high frequency brainwave activity going on. What you have to do in order to get yourself from that high beta to somewhere approaching that alpha is you have to use once you I call it observe, plan, test, OPT, right? It's the first part of optimal. So observe, okay, know where the traps are, what the line is, where your break point is, what the targets are doing at the break point, right? And then what technique am I going to use to break it? And therefore, where does my gun need to start, and how do I need to move to it? So all of that happens during that outside the box beta phase. But the key here to separate you from this beta is the testing phase. So using the outstretched hand of your lead arm, which for right-handed shooters, the left arm, moving your hand in such a way, in the same way that you will move your gun. And so if you do that half a dozen times, what happens is that then becomes somewhat automatic, it starts to feed the subconscious. And so when we do get up into the box, what we've developed as our plan and our process for engaging those targets will be a little more automated than if we just step up into the box. And the problem, the worst case scenario for someone that you and I work with on the mental game and their approach is the person that doesn't pay any attention to what the targets are doing, gets up into the box. Oh, where are the targets again? Okay, yeah, because now they're in their beta and they're trying to execute targets, which is
yeah, especially if they have fear and doubt and insecurities and all sorts of other stuff happening, right? They're kind of really setting themselves up for a mess there. So the zone is definitely something then that you recognize. What's your thoughts on the concept of it's 90% mental? That's, been said by coaches in all different sports and all that over the years.
So I agree with that, first of all, but it's true at a certain point in a competitor's development, right? So there's technical ability and there's mental ability, right? And at the beginning of the evolution of a competitor, okay, the mechanical aspect, the technical aspect overrides the importance of the mental aspect, right? You're just trying to figure out, how you should move this thing and how your hands should move and all that, right? And the mental game is really a very small part of it. But as time goes on and there's fewer and fewer targets that are beyond your technical ability, then the mental game, your mental processes become a huge part of what separates what Joan Vickers from University of Calgary calls the elite versus the near elite.
Yeah.
So elite versus near elite. So I think the elite shooters have that down. They know how to get in the zone over and over again. But at the same time, and this may sound contradictory to what I've just said, that as you move along, technical is more important in the beginning, less important at the end. It's still important to keep it up, but mental becomes, 90%, let's say, as an example. It's never, ever too early to get started on understanding the mental game and the mental process. So I know that may sound contradictory, but at least in the beginning, if you understand that it is a mental process that you have to go through as in any sports activity. I call what we do a self-timed sports execution, right? So, we decide when the targets go because we call pull, right? So, and I did a lot of studying outside of our sport because in 2008, 2009, in that era, there wasn't a whole lot written about the mental game in our sport. So I went outside and looked at other self-timed sports, hitting a golf shot, shooting a foul shot, those types of things. And what I found was common among athletes was, number one, there was some visualization going on. There was some that creating that out-of-body experience. Number two, there was deep breathing. Why deep breathing? Because what we do when we anticipate an action we are about to do, particularly when there's pressure on us to perform well, we start breathing shallowly. And when we do that, our eyes and our brain become oxygen deprived. We don't perform as well. So deep breathing is extremely important as number two. And then the third thing that's essential is your trigger. And in sporting clays, because our clay target sports in general, because our eyes are so incredibly important, but not just to look, but to focus, which is different, right? Looking and focusing is two different things. To fovea, that acute foveal focus to feed the brain target information. We need to remind ourselves of where we're going to focus on the target, how we're going to focus on the target. So to summarize, it's the visualization, the deep breathing, hyperoxygenation, and the cue, the visual cue, or the trigger.
Yeah.
Some people call it.
Yeah. But to go back to what you had said that sounded contradictory, I have a few things come to my mind, but one related to like elite athletes. So back in like 2008 or so, Nuda Begay was one of my clients, and He was Tiger Woods' college roommate and also now a commentator on the Golf Channel. That's how people know him. So he's a PGA Tour pro. But I remember one day I was working with him and he grabbed a piece of paper and he drew out, it says 140 guys at an event that have got their cards that are, playing at a PGA Tour event. He said the only ones that you will consistently, first he said none of them got on the PGA Tour. None of them qualified. Without having great mechanics. Like you absolutely have to have great mechanics to qualify to be on the PGA Tour. He's like, but the ones that you will see consistently in the top 10 have the great mental game as well. He said every once in a while you'll see somebody pop up, they're tending to be around 110, 100 or whatever, and then they might pop up. Probably won't survive Sunday, but they won't stay up there, or they might have a win and then you never hear from them again. And that's because of their mental game. It's not like their mechanics disappeared. And I've seen that over and over again. But going to the other side, because what you said related to basically getting your mechanics down first and then waiting for your mental later, or maybe it's not as applicable till later. I've heard other coaches or instructors say that. And when I hear that, what comes to my mind is I personally think there's different mental trainers or mental games. Like what's taught in college for sports psychology is not what I'm doing, right? Sports psychology, from what I've seen, even at a master's level, which is my podcast right before you, a master level performance coach with a master's sports psychology degree. She was saying, some of the things she's saying or said were a little bit more surface than what I teach. So if we're looking, and this is going to tie into something you and I talked about before I pushed record, and that's related to the fear and such that women can experience that I'd love to talk to you about. But for the kind of mental game that I recognize, worry, doubt, fear, lack of confidence, insecurities, regret, overthinking, trying too hard, can't move on from a miss, worried about how much time you're taking in the stand, worried about what these people think that are watching you, or that you're squatted up with a pro and you're not a pro. Like so many different mental things that could be going on. To me, the mental game can be addressed up front because of all of those aspects that are mental that can hold somebody back. But then tying it in, Dawn has 3 girls, 3 women, 3 young ladies, 3 daughters. How's that? And so we're going to jump into that. But I wanted to tell you before we do, from a marketing perspective, I've been learning social media marketing now for about a year and trying to really figure out what people like to see in all sorts of different aspects. But my first viral video, it went viral like 2 months ago or something. And it's my Clay Shooting Mind Game Monday. And it was about whether or not, or why. Why do you feel a woman has not got HOA at a tournament, I think I said a major tournament in sporting clays? Just hit the ground running. It's like 80,000 views. There's hundreds and hundreds of comments. There's hundreds and hundreds of likes. And some people don't like. So the angle I took on it was basically subconscious programming, having, whether it was they were exactly told things like, well, you can do this sport, but you may not ever get very far in it, or I don't even know what. There's a lot of fear with guns for women for whatever reason over the years. There could be just implied, this is a men's sport. There are definitely, from women that I've interviewed for this particular podcast, there are top elite female shooters that have all different opinions on this. But a lot of women say, especially when they first start shooting, I shouldn't even say especially, they could be pretty high level. And a man in their squad who doesn't know who they are kind of wants to put them under their wing and like, oh, let me help you with that. Or, hey, you're above or below or whatever, like something like that. It's this implication that this woman needs help, even if she is one of the best, and the guy just doesn't even know her, right? So that's the kind of stuff that, whether it's direct or indirect, that I believe has affected the subconscious mind of some women, because otherwise the sport itself, the physique of the body, lifting a 10-pound gun over and over again over a 3-hour period or something is totally doable by men and women. The ability to focus is totally doable by men and women. There's really nothing, in my opinion, that makes it more of a male-dominated winning sport than. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, as you pointed out, I'm a girl dad. So,
Yeah.
and unapologetically. I've got 3 daughters, 33, 26, and 18. But I've also managed a lot of females in the corporate world, none in the military because I was in the infantry, but certainly, and I teach many of them now. What I would say is, and you or I are going to get some mad mail on this, but I think there's something inherent in the way we raise females
Well, yeah,
as a
that's kind of what I was
society.
saying, right? Yeah.
Yeah, as we raise females in a society, is that they're capable of this, but they're not as capable in that. And most of those things that I'm alluding to are those sort of male dominated things like shooting, right?
Yeah.
I to qualify what I'm about to say, I do think that the the height and size of a person's body does affect their ability to move a shotgun. If you look at most all of the successful male shooters as compared to the rest of the male shooters, they all tend to be large frame. So I think the frame has a lot to do. Let's put it this way: it's a force multiplier. Okay, so I think the size of the person's frame has something to do with their ability to move a shotgun. Okay, that's just my opinion. It's not necessarily muscles, right? It's the frame. So and you see that in kids, for example. People always ask me, well, what's the age at which I should start my son on to shoot a shotgun? And I always say it's hard for me to answer without seeing him, but I would say between 10 and 14. Now that seems like a very large, gap, but it is because every 10-year-old is not the same, and every 14-year-old is not the same. So, and I always, by the way, encourage them to start their kid on BB gun. The skill it takes to shoot a BB gun at a moving target, like a large moving target, like a ball or something like that, or a plate, is the same exact skill they're going to use to shoot sporting clays when they get big enough to hold the guns. So that's one thing, the frame. And I think obviously on average, men are bigger frame than women. So do I think there's some physical disadvantage there? Yeah, I think there's some, but again, there are exceptions on both sides of the spectrum in terms of size, right? But what you're saying is true. I mean, the eyes work the same. The mind with regard to moving targets works the same.
Right.
So from that perspective, there's equity, there's parity. But I do think there's that mental aspect of, women can't, well, women are I mean, it's even the concurrent system, right? Of, well, we have women separately. It wasn't until I became an old guy that I understood why there was a senior or a super senior.
Right.
It's like, why are those guys in a separate class? That's just, I don't agree with that. And then I became a senior and I realized, okay. So your eyes start to go after a while, and they're not the acuity's not as good, and the ability to, execute saccadic movements not as good, all of that. So I know I'm veering off topic, but I think let's go to the corporate world. I managed a number of females, and they were really, a couple of them were really, really good. And the ones that were really good that I mentored, I used to, my counsel to them was pretty consistent in that, your only problem is that you don't know how good you are, and that your confidence falls behind your abilities. And in order to be the best in order to be the best in class, your confidence needs to outweigh your abilities. Meaning that if you don't challenge yourself that you're better than you are, right? You can be better than you are, and your confidence exceeds your abilities, you're going to strive for that next level of proficiency. If it doesn't, then you tend not to. So I think confidence is the one element that on average is different between men and women.
Right.
And
Right.
and I'm doing my best in my house to fix that.
Right, you were saying that, like, very aware of that and raising your daughters differently. My father, I don't remember when my father first started saying this to me, but so I have myself, my sister, and a brother. And my father had 2 sisters, and from his experience with them, one had been married to like a physically abusive alcoholic, but afraid to leave and afraid that she couldn't be out there on her own or whatever, or just caught in those cycles. And another one was just like whatever, unhappy in her marriage. And so I don't know when he started saying it, but from a young age, my father was like, my daughters will be educated, independent, and be able to, do their own thing and leave an unhealthy relationship if they need to. Because that's what led him to want to have these strong daughters. I've just not known any different. Now I've never had that competitive athletic drive in me, but I could definitely see how that would just carry over, right? If you had a parent or a father of a daughter who was like, you can do anything you put your mind to, versus, a father or a mother too, that has a son and a daughter, and he takes the son hunting and shooting, but not the daughter, right? That's the kind of invisible message that could be there. And,
No, 100%.
and
Yeah.
not even intentionally, right? Just for not even knowing, or intentionally, if that person just really thinks a woman's place is at her home, and this is, you're going to learn what you need from your mother. There's so many different ways that it can happen. Yeah. So, but, the women that are doing great in sporting clays competitively, you can see the confidence on their face, right? I mean,
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Not to say they're perfect and don't have issues with confidence, insecurities, but none of the top shooters that I've ever worked with didn't have some of their own men didn't have some of their own insecurities also. I mean, we
Right.
are
Sure.
all human, and that's just an aspect of it, is to recognize what those are in yourself and continually overcome them.
Well, this may be getting way off topic, but number one, I've never met your dad, but I like him already.
Yeah.
And, and what I'm about to say may be a little off topic, but, I think that I firmly believe that, and I was product of a divorce, by the way. I was 12, but, I think, if you poll the top performers among females, the same goes for males. I mean, 70% of the people in prison grew up in a one-person adult
Yeah.
home. But I think that if you did a poll of all the top women in the sport, I would guess that most of them grew up in a two-parent home and had a good relationship with their dad, and their dad was a big part of their life.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's my guess, but I could be wrong.
Well, to just share on a personal basis, something I don't always put out there, but my mother was actually is very mentally ill. Like, so she was the opposite of my father. Like, she put me down constantly. And my parents were divorced, but I was the target of her narcissistic behavior. So she put me down a ton, and to the point that I had to block her out of my life, because she repeatedly did that my entire life. So my point with that, though, is like, it's all what you do with it. Like, am I going to rise above that? Am I going to learn from it? Not that it happens overnight. We all come from different situations. For me, it ended up being a lifelong journey to overcome some of that programming of not being enough, not being good enough, like, you're this, you're horrible, you're this or that. And ultimately, some form of drive that just kept me going, right? And so I don't think that there's always two parents with a father that's supportive. I don't know that there's always a certain kind of equation. It's interesting because, like, let's say, 4 siblings grow up in a home with an abusive alcoholic father. One strives and does great. Another one ends up abusive and alcoholic himself, and another one this and that. And it's really fascinating to me to see how, just the personalities of the kids and how they take that upbringing and what it turns into. But
No, it's true. And it could be that that's why I'm not a research psychologist or a sociologist. I could be wrong on that, but it's just been my anecdotal observations.
It is just so fascinating to me. But that strive is one of the things that I love about working with athletes, because even though they might want to quit when things aren't going their way, most of the time they don't. And they just keep coming back for more, and they keep trying to do better. And they're hungry for information that's going to teach them what they need to do better. And they strive for this level of perfection that, again, two sides of that coin, could be detrimental and problematic, but also good. There's so many different ways to look at it. But that drive to succeed and to keep doing what they need to do to try to rise to the level that they want to rise to.
Yeah, no, it's like the kid who parents were divorced, he ends up getting divorced. or the one that had parents who were divorced and says, I'm never going to get divorced, and was
Yeah.
married for 45 years. So it's the
Right.
same thing you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to touch back on you said out of body. It feels like an out of body experience when you're shooting in the zone or the flow. And one of the things that I've seen are tied together, especially being a hypnotherapist, is what we consider, let's say, being in the body. So if you got out of body, you got in the body, right? So what we think of as being in the body is that conscious mind. It's like trying to make things happen, analyzing things to death, can't turn it off, And so it almost seems odd to us when something falls in place when we didn't try so hard, or like that zone state where it didn't even feel like it was me pulling the trigger, because we identify ourselves as me, this conscious beta trying to make things happen. And when you let go of that, we are even more powerful. And going back to your faith, I've tied together because I'm a super spiritual person and study this stuff like crazy, obsessively. That's when we're tapped into our most highest self. That's when we're tapped into source. That's when we're tapped into God. That's when we are more in likeness. And it's not when we're in worry, doubt, fear, second guessing, regret, and all that. It's when you are in trust and when you're in faith, and you're actually much more powerful in that position. And then we call it the zone. We call it the flow.
Yeah. Well, I think too, guys can be, and I think this is uniquely a guy thing, is that we can be really, I mean, ladies can be hard on themselves too, but I think guys are more commonly the ones that, it's more common to see a guy that's really hard on himself, right?
Yeah.
And they're usually the ones that are, swinging their gun against a tree, or swinging their golf club,
Right.
or throwing their golf club into the pond, But and this might be getting off topic, but when you understand there's a source of forgiveness, right? That's outside yourself, right?
So important.
And in Christianity, I have been forgiven by my Savior, regardless of how flawed I am.
Yeah.
Right. There's a comfort in that you now it's much easier for you to forgive yourself, because the one who's all knowing is forgiven.
Yes.
And
to let go, which
Right,
is a really cool phenomenon that I've observed with athletes. Like typically they let go because they want to quit. Like they're so frustrated and they're not performing as well as they like, and they let go, and all of a sudden they do better. But that letting go is really the ticket. But it's part of a big part, in my opinion, of having true, genuine faith is a letting go.
Let me drill down on that letting go thing, because I think it's a huge part. I guess I would define it differently, right? So when you try to get to a target physically versus letting your eyes lead your hands to the target, they're
Nice.
two different things.
Yes.
Two totally different things.
Yeah.
And this is really all we're doing. If you want to make, we're making things sound really complicated, right? But it's as simple as this. It's as simple as focusing, pointing, pulling the trigger. That's it.
Yeah. Get out of your own way.
Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right. So if we lead with our eyes and we allow our hands to follow our eyes and release the physical effort to just putting our hands and our eyes in the same place, things become much easier. So I think that's releasing the control of getting to a target, where to your eye, just match your eyes. That's all you have to do.
And go back to the process. Is another way to say that. Just go to the basics, go to the process. And it sounds so simple. It's easier said than done because of the misuse of our conscious mind. And that's, to me, where the mental comes back in again. It's like the misuse. So come all the way back to your very beginning, one-pointed attention with the conscious mind, having the conscious mind present in that moment. And if it's doing anything else, screwing with you. And it becomes more complicated than it needs to be.
And prior to you closing up the gun and going to your ready position, calling pull, what you're processing in your mind just prior to that becomes critical, right?
That's a tricky balance. I definitely have had clients bring that up to me because they end up like, well, wait a minute. If I'm doing this all instinctively and intuitively, the shooting part, then am I supposed to be doing that at the beginning too? And no, you're absolutely right. You have to analyze. That's the proper use of your conscious mind. Like, use it in that moment to analyze the data and make a plan. And the repetition they're saying is important too. And but then you got to let go, which is so tricky for
Right.
someone.
But see, in my mind, what allows you to let go more is the more effort you put in outside the stand during the pre-shot planning process and the amount of effort you put into testing your plan. So observe, plan, test, OPT.
Sounds like confidence, right?
Of optimal. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
Confidence
if
in your
you know
plan.
what if you step up into that box and you know what the plan is and
Yeah.
you've tested it with your lead hand and you know exactly what you're going to do, exactly where you're going to break, exactly how you're going to move, where you're going to start, when you're going to start, how fast you need to move the gun. You've done all that analytical stuff outside the box.
Yes.
So, and then when you step in, there's a sense of confidence because you have that plan and you tested that plan. Whereas the guy beside you, who you're competing against, he hasn't done the work. I remember taking a lesson from Bill McGuire years ago. I mean, this was 2006, and you get different things from different instructors, right? And the thing I took away from him was, for one, the more effort you put in outside the box, the less effort it takes inside the box. And man, I have held on to that for my whole career, and that's what I teach. The other thing in his case is you gotta know the line, right? And a part of that is the line of the target. Now, part of that is because he pre-mounts and what I call shoulder shrugs. That's his method of shooting, which you can't say doesn't work because he's been pretty successful. But he has to know the line, because if you're pre-mounting and you got the line wrong, you're screwed.
Yeah. And I would expand even further with out of the box, meaning you can't just figure out how to focus on Saturday in the box, like practicing or being out of fear or being out of doubt and second guessing. Like all those mental skills need to be practiced ahead of time, and not just in a pre-shot, like all day, every day, and each day of your life to get better at it.
But again, I think that comes back to the technical aspect. So how do I need to work my eyes? How do I need to treat the target with my eyes? When I'm teaching coaches, and they are teaching, and I'm trying to teach them how to teach beginning shooters, right? I always say, look, if you only accomplish one thing in the first lesson of the student, and the students never shot shotgun before, or they've shot a lot of rifle, or they don't understand, you need to treat that. You need to show them how to treat the targets with their eyes. If you do that, then everything else will flow from there. So if you spend all day on 2 target presentations because they haven't quite figured out, how to treat the target with their eyes, and at the end of the lesson, they know how to treat the target with their eyes, you've won as a coach. I mean, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
But that's the critical thing. And in my opinion, and what my sort of process of working with a student is, the first thing I do is figure out how their eyes work, and I do a little pointing test that I teach and is in the instructor manual. And then the second thing is making sure their gun fits. And then after that, then if you can't get if those two things, if any aspect of those two areas are wrong, then you really can't even go to the next step.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's like a tidbit of advice or wisdom that you would pass on to listeners?
Well, it depends on who they are. If they're shooters, I'm going to borrow. I think it's Lanny Basham said, "There's no problem with having high goals as long as your commitment level is consistent with your goals." So if your goal is just to have fun and be a recreational shooter, that's wonderful. That's the majority of the people in our sport. We spend a lot of time talking about, the top, let's say the 2,000 people that go to nationals, right? And, but the reality is that we got 4 million or 5 million, 4 to 5 million clay target shooters. So the majority of the shooters out there are recreational shooters, and those are also they feed into the pool of competitors. For someone who's in shooting, whether it's just to have fun or whether it's to win, along that whole spectrum, is just make sure your commitment level is consistent with what you want to accomplish.
Nice. That's a really good insight. I do want to tell listeners to be sure to follow me and my shotgun club on social media. We always post stuff and lots of free information, but also you can get free goodies for my mental training or my shotgun club at dawngrant.com/free. And definitely come see me and shoot some Joe Skull targets at Amelia Shotgun Sport. So, Don, give us your contact info, website, anything that you want to tell people about how they can get you and what you offer them.
Sure. My website is doncurrie.com. That's DONCURRIE. I've got 2 books out. Both are available on Amazon, and 2 videos also available. Full-length DVDs also available on Amazon. Both my Mastering Sporting Clays and my Focus Movement Faith are both the highest reviewed and most reviewed on Amazon.
Nice.
My website has all my teaching hours and my teaching days, I should say, but I'm a little strange in that I actually answer my phone. So, and I answer my emails too. So if you don't have to just go on my website. I don't have any gatekeepers. So give me a call or send me an email. I prefer not text simply because I can't keep everybody straight. But and I don't have sponsors, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I would like to say that I sell custom guns in conjunction with my fitting business, and I sell the majority of what I sell are Parazzis, Purdy's, Berettas, Guria, Zoli, and I am a Pila dealer as well as an ESP fitter.
Nice.
And a dealer. So if you're in need of any of those things, I'd be glad to help you.
And of course, the NSCA instruction
Yeah,
to be a level 1, 2, or 3 instructor, right?
Yeah, I'd really encourage anybody who is out there helping young shooters or out there helping any shooters to go to a level 1. And, a lot of folks just go to level 1, never go any higher, but then there are others that go on to level 2 and 3. And so, a lot of what I do, I spend a lot of time talking to coaches, and I don't charge them for it. I mean, that's just part of my give back, but I spend a lot of time mentoring coaches who reach out to me. Another, I guess, piece of advice would be to shooters and coaches is to be really good at anything. You got to have mentors, and your mentors are not going to pick you. You have to pick them.
Nice.
So in every instructor course I teach, I tell them, you need mentors. I had 3. You need at least 1. I'm your mentor. If you don't like me, fire me and find somebody else. But
right.
do have a mentor. It will accelerate your growth, nice. Whether it's in business, whether it's in life, whether it's as a shooter or as a coach.
Perfect. That's great advice. And thanks, Don. It was so great catching up with you again. It has been several years since we've chatted. So congrats on all that you've accomplished and continue to accomplish.
Well, thank you, Don. I love your show, and it was good to reconnect.
Perfect.
Thank you for joining us on Clay Mastermind with Dawn Grant. Mental excellence and industry insights. Brought to you by the Clay Lab. We hope you found today's episode inspiring and informative. Remember, mastering the mental game is key to unlocking your full potential on the course. And through our conversations with industry leaders, we aim to provide you with valuable insights into the world of clay shooting. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share it. For more insights, training tips, and updates on upcoming events, Dawn Grant and Amelia Shotgun Sports are on all social media platforms. Go to dawngrant.com and come shoot at Amelia Shotgun Sports. Stay focused, stay driven, and keep pushing your limits. Until next time, Dawn wishes you success and happiness on your journey to peak performance and industry mastery.